All right, hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan, everyone. It is Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern. We are here with yet another one of our Live at Epiphan shows. And I'm actually really excited about this one because we are going to be talking to Sai, who is the CEO and founder of Crowdcast, which many of you probably know is a platform we use for our webinars here at Epiphan. So, really excited to have a chat with Sai about all things Crowdcast and things streaming and all those kind of pieces. And, actually, Danny in chat makes a great point, which I think segues excellently into what Sai and I are going to talk about is COVID fear is less, but IP video interest is more. Exactly. And I've been saying this for about a year now that live streaming stuff has accelerated. People have been forced to learn how to do it. Now they've figured it out. There's a lot of people not going back. Even if COVID was gone tomorrow, a lot of this stuff's going to stick around. And I think that's one of the things we're going to be chatting with Sai about. So welcome, everyone. Really excited to share all of this with you. So if you have any questions as we go through, throw them into chat, and we can look at those as we get later on. And, of course, just say hi. We're happy to see you. So let's bring in our guest today, Sai. Like I said, he's the CEO and founder of Crowdcast, which is a live streaming platform, but I'm going to let him kind of tell you more about it. So Sai, introduce yourself and tell us all about Crowdcast.
Awesome. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me here, George. Where to start? So at a high level, my name is Sai. I'm actually originally from Bangladesh. I'm an immigrant to the US. And, many years ago, I got really excited about the idea of bringing people together over live video. And that turned into a seed of an idea that eventually turned into Crowdcast. Without going into the whole story right now, which I can share a little bit later, Crowdcast right now is a live video platform for hosting a pretty wide variety of events, everything from workshops to concerts to conferences and live shows. We have a lot of massive customers like IBM and Adobe and Patreon and things like that, but we also have a lot of creators as well. Folks like Jacob Collier, Kimbra, MIA, people who are more on the creative musician artist side as well, doing a lot of different shows, like everything from concerts to like Q&As and live shows as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive in. It's been really cool to watch the Epiphan team really take it up another level in their events with the level of technical sort of know-how and execution. So I love nerding out on the technical side as well. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that's what's cool about Crowdcast is that it's not purely like some, kind of stuffy corporate webinar platform like some things out there, but it's not just purely a social media thing either. It's got this amazing blend of creators on there, which is really fascinating. And I think just speaks to, what you've created as a product that it can cover so many different people and use cases, which probably means it's pretty easy to use, which we'll probably dive into that more. But and you mentioned you were kind of inspired by delivering video to people. Maybe expand on that a little bit. What sort of triggered you to want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it all, believe it or not, it started in a tiny little retreat in Costa Rica where I was surrounded by these amazing artists, musicians, folks who are like masters in yoga and really rethinking permaculture and new forms of like living. And what was great about that space was just like it showed me a new way of like really of a new future that we could be building towards. But the problem was, despite all these folks and their wisdom, none of them really knew how to use the internet, and none of them knew how to really share that knowledge further than this
Right.
100% retreat they were at. So I decided to team up with some of them to try to see what can we do to host like workshops and things like that, online events at the time. And this is back in like 2015. And the tooling for hosting online events, webinars were just really, really complicated for most normal folk, right? They're designed more for that enterprise, corporate, sort of clientele. But the average person who's like a teacher isn't able to either afford or even navigate these tools, right? So I thought, hey, can I build something? I'm a designer developer. Can I design something that's much, much easier to use that allows folks to host large scale events, so that you can reach the 7 or so billion people out there in the world. So that's what led to the sort of the beginning of that first version.
Right.
And that very soon after, after I built that prototype, that led to a pretty massive conference, called Hack Summit, where we ended up having about 30,000 people showing up for this one event. That at the time it was just me. I was the only developer, and on the platform. But that's what really launched us and allowed us to like get a little bit of angel round funding and eventually build out a team and actually build out the product a little bit more. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I guess that that really highlights, I guess, the pain points you were trying to solve, right? As you were inspired by this group of people, which I think we've probably all encountered them in our lives, that wonderful people, wonderful wisdom and ideas, but yeah, maybe don't quite know how to
Hmm.
use the internet to the best of their abilities, or to the best of the tools that are even available. And I have friends who are yoga instructors and things like that, who the beginning of the pandemic were in exactly the same position. They had no idea how to pivot, because that's not their area of expertise, right? So it's kind of a similar thing, but 6 years ago, when so many of these things weren't really there. I mean,
Hmm.
even Facebook Live was in its infancy 6 years ago. I mean, no one was really using it.
Yeah, I remember when it
So
came out, and
it's
I was like, "This is great," because now Facebook is spending millions of dollars convincing people that this is a great way to share your ideas for us. So,
yeah, yeah. So we understand Crowdcast saw huge success and huge growth in 2020, despite all the things are being unexpected. For example, we know as a customer there were a couple small growing pains, which we're incredibly thankful that were addressed immediately. So maybe tell us a little bit of the I go back a year. What was the early COVID impact on Crowdcast?
yeah, I like to say that 2020 was the best and worst year at the same time.
Agreed.
Right before COVID, our team was only about 5 people. So it was a very very small team, and I just remember that week that everyone started canceling their events. I had 2 new engineers join the team, and right on that same week, everything just went vertical. All of our metrics. Suddenly, we were trying to catch up to all this interest of folks wanting to host online gatherings for maybe for the first time. And
Right.
so over the next 90 days, we just, I mean, I don't even know, we worked a lot. We worked a lot to try to keep up with that, with the rate of interest. And we ended up growing about 6x. So at our peak, we had over 1 million people, on the platform, attending Crowdcast events. And our revenues 3x. Our team by the end of those 3 months ended up getting to about 20 people. So we had to move really, really quickly. And while that was really exciting, a lot of interest, it also meant scaling our software, our technology, right, to support
Right.
this massive influx within weeks, plus hiring some new folks who had never seen the code before, right? So it was quite a trip. And so the first, I would say 90 days, right after the first 90 days, we started hitting some scalability issues. When you had to support,
Mhm.
suddenly imagine a house that was built for one size is now throwing a lot more people into it than we had ever imagined moving in so quickly. The foundation started crumbling. We started having
Yeah.
some database scaling issues, and we put a lot of resources on scaling those. So it took about, I would say, 2 to 3 months to really get past it. But there was a period where things were shaky, and that scared a lot of folks. But that also led to us deciding, hey, now that we've got these foundations mostly taken care of at this scale, let's actually build a whole new house. Let's build a whole new foundation. So over the last year, since that whole period, we've been pretty heads down on building the next version of Crowdcast, which I'm excited to share a little bit about later in the conversation.
So it probably goes without saying things look a little differently today than they did, even though we know you mentioned there's still some new stuff that you have planned, but probably looks pretty different from now, when a year ago in terms of all those different pieces, or at least under the hood, maybe not on the surface.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the biggest example of this, real quick, is our chat. Like when you have 10,000 people all chatting at the same time, you hit new bottlenecks that you don't even know existed. And
Right.
you don't really know that you can't scale until you hit those bottlenecks, right? We thought we were able to scale to that limit, but once we hit those limits, we decided to, at least for that chat, like completely gut out what we had previously and replace it with a whole new architecture. And
Right.
that was a big piece of us allowing to scale. Because before that, we were literally telling some customers like, hey, you're having a big event, please disable chat because we're not sure if this is going to work. And there were times where, like, probably one of the most embarrassing moments was when we had Singularity University. They had, right when COVID started, obviously, like they decided to organize a massive conference, and within 4 days they gathered 20,000 people for this conference. Right. It was insane. And I think it was a Monday morning or Tuesday morning when they hit, our whole site went down for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then the rest of the day it was like struggling. So these are some of the things that I'm glad that we got out. But on the surface, you won't be able to tell just by looking at the interface.
Yeah, which is great because obviously, one of the reasons that we chose Crowdcast as a platform to use for webinars is some of the tools that you guys have that other things just don't quite deliver, or maybe are not quite as easy, or maybe aren't, one platform has half of it, another platform has the other half, and it's not very many places that have it all in one spot. And that's kind of why, we discovered Crowdcast and started using you guys. And we did run into some of those temporary glitches, I guess probably like April last year during those scaling times. But overall, it was still very painless to the customer's perspective. There was occasional little hiccups, but then, we would stabilize, and then to our impression as a customer, very quickly, everything was perfectly great again. So I'm sure it was very stressful for you guys, but also as a technology company, of course, we understood what was happening. We fully understood, like, this is what happens when things go straight vertical when you don't expect them. Oh, yeah. That's just par for the course. So so what are the major changes that you have observed sort of in the streaming industry as a whole since the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things.
I mean, besides tens of thousands of people rushing to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at first people were trying to just figure out, like, what are the tools, right? How do we just bring things online? And in the process, I think people started to realize that one tool isn't going to solve all the problems. And what ended up happening was folks leaned towards the tools that were the most stable, right? So Zoom being like the biggest example of that, right? Where Zoom was really designed for business meetings, corporate meetings, but because it was stable enough, people were using it for everything, for concerts, for conferences, for, classroom environments, things that it just wasn't designed for.
And they did not escape the scaling issues either.
Of course, yeah. And they had a lot of security issues as well. And, I don't envy their situation in many ways.
No.
But, as far as like an overall shift, I think people are realizing that, or have realized that there's actually a lot of benefits to going virtual. The things that we didn't even have before COVID, right? Like access, like people can access events that they weren't able to access previously. Costs, right? The price of that access, flexibility from work and home, like situation, right? Ability to like learn different things without having to go to a physical institution, right? So a lot of shifts have been made. And I think now where people are just trying to figure out, okay, now that we know there are a lot of benefits to going virtual and going live online, what are the tools that are more suited for this particular use case, right? So now we're seeing this decoupling, this unbundling happening from Zoom, which is good because you can't really have one tool that does it all, right?
No. And well, it's funny. I mean, our viewers know that I probably beat this dead horse a bit too much, but conferencing and streaming are very different things. They are not the same. They have different limits, different uses, and they're good in different ways and bad in different ways. And so you have to kind of figure out, what's the best suited for what you're ultimately trying to deliver, right? You're trying to deliver a product, your content, and how do you want to do that in the most effective way? Some people it's real time, some people it's super high quality, fidelity, visual and audio wise, and those are going to take you in different directions. So I guess one of the things we could look at is what sort of sectors did you observe from your customer base that were the largest growth? Of course, we don't have to name drop anyone, but what sectors really exploded? I mean, high tech companies have been leveraging this stuff for a while, so imagine that increased, but not dramatically.
Yeah.
But what are some of the new ones?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all the sectors that's never been online has now moved
Right.
online. We see a lot of now theater and art shows on Crowdcast. If you just go to our homepage and search for theater, you'll see some examples of a lot of really great shows. There's a lot of concerts and actual music events that are getting streamed, and some interesting like subsegments like authors and bookstores. Like bookstores, almost every bookstore now, I'd say in the U.S. at least, is on Crowdcast, like doing interviews with
Interesting.
different authors, and so industries that were generally not as tech savvy, are finding tools like Crowdcast that are easy for them to understand and use to then bring their communities together. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing though is people recognizing the need for a tool to host continuous conversations, as opposed to there are conference tools, for example, that are great for big companies that want to maybe host a conference once a quarter, once a year, and there's a lot of those tools out there. There's meeting software like Zoom that allow you to have those one-off meetings. But when it comes to broadcasting your message out there, right, having like a place, that's your live channel where you're going live every week, every month, doing a meetup, doing a live show, that format is really what so far only exists in the gaming world, right? You got Twitch and gamers are going live all the time. But for the rest of the folks, doing live shows is still very, very difficult. So that's really the place that we're focusing on.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, right? Because I mean, obviously, a lot of people that fit that sort of demographic you mentioned have been leveraging social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, and so on, and we do the same thing with this show. But when we wanted to pivot specifically for webinars, recognizing that was going to be something of high demand to get our message out, through the pandemic, we knew right away that those platforms weren't, as a company, going to give us what we need, and again, that's where we came to Crowdcast. And so some of the tools that excited us, and maybe you can kind of talk about this a little bit, but some of the things, again, people need to realize that as a company, when we host this kind of stuff, we're looking for something back as well. We're not just throwing it out there. We're looking for something back, and that's something social media doesn't necessarily provide, and that usually takes the form of some sort of lead generation, without going into the deep marketing weeds. But you want to be able to capture people's contact information to be able to follow up with them for sales purposes and sales pipelines. That's the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
That's virtually selling a ticket, right?
Yeah.
But you guys also sell actual tickets. You have a system for that too, if I recall, which is why so many, I guess, theater things work on Crowdcast. But yeah, I mean, talk about some of those tools and why those are important for Crowdcast clients.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point you bring up. There's this tricky balance that businesses have right now where you're trying to reach more people, but you're also at a certain stage. So at phase one, you're audience building, right? You're just looking for people to see your stuff, and you're happy to share that out without any collection of an email or a payment. But then at some point, you're looking to then monetize and sort of convert those users, right?
Right.
And so in phase one, you're mainly using social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube, right? And then once you have a certain level of followership, you start doing the more gated content, which is email-based or maybe payment. And so it's a tricky balance. What we're trying to do is we're focused on that live show format, because what people are starting to realize is that webinars are just live shows with where the gated content is in email. Like that's really it.
Right.
Right. So it's still the same format. It's just now you're collecting some information so you can follow up with them later. So that's really the tooling that we're thinking about, is how do we think about that full progression you might have, not just as a company, but also as a creator, right? You start out as growing your audience somewhere on a platform that you're renting the audience, right? And then you're looking to grow your email list or, collect that payment or whatever it is, maybe host members only content. So yeah, so that's really the sort of the range that we're thinking about.
Yeah. And I think also, as from a creator's perspective, since I often am the one conducting a lot of the webinars for Epiphan, what I find is, I guess, a lot of that demand gen stuff, that's all kind of back end things for for those for the people who like that sort of stuff. For me, I'm looking at it as the guy who's staring into the camera. What tools are present that are better or more efficient than what's available on something like YouTube? Like YouTube has chat, and chat's cool, but it's still pretty limited. Some social media platforms have put polling in, but it's clunky, it's clumsy, it doesn't work that well. And so what we found, and what, again, all the marketing guys told me, Crowdcast is awesome for all this back end stuff we're going to get out of it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I don't care about that. What about me presenting? And so when I'm presenting, I get to see a separate Q&A panel from chat, which is really important. You guys have that kind of Reddit-esque upvoting tool in the Q&A panel, which is more valuable than I think people realize. And then separate polling that we can preload in advance of the event and just trigger them when we want to, but no one's creating them on the fly either, right? So it's kind of this perfect mix of different tools that make it easy as a presenter. To be honest, it's super easy as a presenter, but also all the sales and marketing guys get their piece too.
Yeah. I think one thing that the sales and marketing folks need to understand is that it really all comes down to that, like how successful you are at creating that connection with your audience, right? In that live show. And that means not just watching the chat, but being able to pull people up on stage, right? Being able to give acknowledgement directly or see who wants to ask questions, and making everything you can do to really build a strong connection with that audience. If that happens, then naturally that trust leads to people being more interested in your company, right? And maybe joining your newsletter or checking out your product and so on. So the sales and marketing is sort of a lagging indicator of that first one, which is, are people engaging in with you? Are people interacting? Or do they care, right? And so those are the things that we're thinking about. Is how do we really give you any, there's, like you mentioned, there's a couple of tools today, but we're really thinking about even beyond that. How do we really integrate that experience even further so that today I would say people already feel, when they show up in your Crowdcast, they feel excited about it because it doesn't look like in a corporate webinar platform, like, oh, this feels fun. There's emojis, there's links and things like that. There's identity, there's bios and stuff. But there's just a lot more that we can do there. So we're going to
take a look at that in a second here. But I guess the other piece of it that was important for us, of course, as Epiphan, we're obviously going to be using our own hardware to do some of this. And that was another part, is that there are some pretty cool web-based tools out there. I'm sure a lot of our viewers have either heard of or encountered platforms like StreamYard, right? And StreamYard's cool, but one of the things StreamYard cannot do that Crowdcast can is ingest a third party or a hardware encoder. And you guys currently use RTMP streaming for this. But that's something like StreamYard can't do, right? They exist only solely within a browser-based WebRTC environment, and that's it. I think the great part about what you guys have done is for corporate customers like us who are doing our own video production and we're just looking to throw an RTMP stream out there, you support that and it works extremely well and it's very easy to use. But at the same time, for the people who are maybe not quite that sophisticated, maybe that's the wrong word, maybe that's unfair.
Technical,
but people who are not quite, they're not quite that technical. You guys do have all the WebRTC stuff as well. That I would say, in my experience, is absolutely head-to-head with things like StreamYard in terms of functionality and usage. So I think that's one of the things that really excites me about Crowdcast, is you have this range of flexibility for those clients, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think one thing that we recognize is that there are tools like StreamYard that do a good job adding sort of a level of production that's easy for non-technical folks. But at the end of the day, it's just that production layer, right? It's not the whole event. And so what we're really focused on is that full vertical integration of, can you show up to a Crowdcast that handles the payment and registration? There's an audience there in the event, right? They can actually come up on stage. You can produce that show all in that one tool. Because I think if you can really get that barrier to entry as low as possible, to make that difficulty as low as possible, we have the potential, this is really where we're going, of unlocking the next wave of media is sort of what we're thinking about. If you think of it as right now, podcasting is really popular and big because the tooling to do podcasts has gotten really, really easy. People are able to host YouTube channels with where they upload videos because to make it a recorded video now and edit it is really, really easy. But to host a live show, other than the gamers, like for non-gaming live shows, is still very, very hard, And I think once you can lower that barrier to entry, live video podcasts, live shows would be that next wave of content. So that's really what we're thinking about here.
Yeah, and I think, again, 2020 demonstrated that to a lot of people, that there was value in even just doing what we've been doing for, over 200 episodes now of this show, of just throwing it out there. And even if the only thing you get out of it is a little bit of brand recognition, it still can make a big difference. And there's a lot of value in that. So I guess, that kind of plays into one thing is where do we see the future going? I mean, we here have been talking about, I've mentioned it a lot, where, again, barrier to entry is lower. We've often, semi-jokingly, but semi-serious, internally at Epiphan, thrown around the term of democratization of video, that kind of thing. But also that, the barrier to entry is already pretty low, but then also educating people on the best ways to make the most of it. The pandemic really changed things. What might have taken 3 or 4 years, 5 years even, happened in 6 months in a lot of cases, in terms of the demand, requirements, people learning about it, and people doing it. And so what's your take on the future of do we going to continue to see that? Is that where we're going to continue to go into the future, where there's no going back from this and there's still growth?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, no one really knows, right? There's so many uncertainties around the future of COVID and the pandemic. But what has been pretty clear is that we've now made a permanent shift towards leveraging asynchronous tools and live video tools to connect with people in all sorts of ways. Before COVID, we started seeing examples of events where they would do hybrid events, an event where it's a conference in person, maybe a few hundred people there with tickets. But then at the same time, they would actually multi-stream out that event to Crowdcast, and they would have a paid ticket, but through a virtual platform. And what we started seeing is some examples of events where they were making more money from the virtual ticket than the in-person ticket, right? So we thought, hey, this is already starting to become a real thing. We need to think about how can we enable hybrid events where instead of spending a ton of money every month renting out a venue and trying to get people together and only some people show up, why don't we save that for maybe once a year, do a massive in-person event, but then between those, you have a much lower overhead of hosting a virtual event, right? So, and then when you do the in-person event, keep that virtual audience there so that you can still have the ability for folks to tune in and access the content that way. So we already seen that pre-COVID, and moving forward, with the folks that we're talking to, it's clear that it's going to be sort of the standard. One of the things that I really want to accelerate, we've got some pretty big projects lined up right now for Crowdcast. Like I know Lindsay's asking in the audience, closed captioning, virtual backgrounds.
I was going to say, it's the perfect segue question.
So Lindsay, I'll share some of the stuff that we're working on that's very related to that. But even beyond sort of product updates, one of the things I'm excited about is, I'm in the Bay Area, I'm in Berkeley, and there's all these amazing venues, music venues, just gathering spots that people can't gather right now. But they have all the they have the really great stage, they have really great lighting, they have cameras. They may not know how to stream it really well online, but they've got all the right stuff. And they're basically places that are waiting to get unlocked to be able to, even if COVID continued, even if you weren't gathering, to be able to be upgraded to spaces to live stream, right? So,
well, it's funny because, kind of what you're talking about there is really, even once we can go back to being together in these venues, which everyone is obviously desperate to do, there's no question. No one wants to be online instead of in person. But what going and doing both as a hybrid event provides is a larger audience base to start with. And we've seen this a lot with some of our customers in the churches in the house of worship space where, they used to get maybe 100 people on a Sunday. COVID forced them to pivot. But now their audience online is hundreds of people, thousands of people even, well beyond what they would ever get in person. And so for customers like that, they're probably not going back because there's this new outreach, this new avenue, whether it's a company looking for revenue, whether it's a venue looking for revenue, or whether it's a community organization like a church that's just trying to grow their community. All of that is important. And, I think that's where, there's a little bit of this Pandora's box that's been opened when it comes to this stuff for the people that have learned how to use it well and have found the right platforms that are going to deliver what they need. Because I'd also hear from customers every day that have tried it, failed to some extent, and it's probably because they didn't spend the time to figure out how to do it well or choose the right platform. So again, that's where I'm excited about the tools you guys already have and some of the things you've mentioned that you're working on. So maybe let's dive into that and help answer Lindsay's question. But what do you have planned for Crowdcast going forward? Do you have any secrets to let us in on today?
Yeah, no, there's so much to share. But before I say that, one thing to mention is that it's really great what you guys are doing with Epiphan, because the hardware is the things that is the piece that many people don't know how to use, right? So they need easier to use, more powerful, capable hardware that is just kind of plug and play, right? And what we're seeing is, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the majority of people, right? The individuals who are not necessarily massive corporations, right? But once you hit a certain level of, size, that's when you're looking to level it up with more advanced hardware, cameras, things like that. And right now there aren't that many options out there that are like Epiphan that that make it really easy to host these more advanced high production events, right? So with that said, one of the main things that we're doing right now is building the next version of Crowdcast that gives you more tools around more tools to produce your event well. So there's two places that I can talk about right now. One is on the event production. So let me just share my screen here.
Sure.
And I can only share one slide right now, but this will give you a sense of the design direction that we're going. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at here, and you might want to, scroll down a little bit, or I guess I can do this. This would help. So what we're doing is we're really thinking about how do you give so this is sort of the new design that's coming. We're really thinking about how do you give the host more ability to sort of stay connected with the audience and have a live presence there, and also give them the ability to fully control that show, right? So some of the things that are coming are this is a design mock-up. This isn't our real code here. Some of the things are hey, if I'm on camera and I just want to focus on maybe Pam over here, right? I should just be able to do that, right? Where it just animates over without knowing any complicated tooling, right? Or if I wanted to give Pam the full stage, I should be able to do that, and I would have other guests that are still able to be listened to, but they're not on stage, right?
Right.
And then you can kind of go back and control the layout however you want, and give you all the tools to control this piece. Another area, and you can kind of just see a little hint at it, I can't share too much about this yet, but we're also bringing a concept that we're calling Studio to Crowdcast, where you're going to be able to really add certain elements like overlays and text to the event itself, so that you can do some level of production right in there. So that includes some things like customizing the background and things like that Lindsay's talking about. But then beyond that, how do we actually give you tools to make the event more accessible, right? So we're bringing in a feature to allow you to have a pinned person for ASL translations, for example,
Right.
which is something that if you watch a Canadian presidential live stream, you have that, but in the US they don't. Right?
Yeah, it's mixed.
And it's kind of silly that the US doesn't think about these things, but we want to make sure that that's like front and center. Like, how do you think about having subtitles, right? So the new design has a whole place for being able to do automated subtitles, and possibly translations too, right? So a lot of cool stuff coming in the event itself, around like making the event more engaging and easier to produce. The other half is really outside the event, is how do you allow people to then go from Crowdcast to Crowdcast and kind of experience a virtual plaza, right? Where you've got events happening all over and you want to go see one and kind of just tune in and be a part of that conversation. So, we're about to launch our new homepage, probably tomorrow. But I'm just going to go to the Discover section just to kind of show you all the events that are already happening right now. So this is just a place where you can start browsing events that are happening. And you can literally type in, whatever you want, and you'll see events that are happening here. And you can see, you can kind of load more, see what else is happening. But you can see this is already a way for you to literally walk around, see what's happening. Like there's one happening with the 19th, it looks like, and they're seems to be hosting a healthcare vaccine conversation. So I don't know if my page will load here while I'm on this stream, but you can see it's just a way to start walking around events, right? Walking around this virtual plaza. And so we're doing...
what's funny about that is that it's one of the most frustrating things about YouTube, right? Is they have this huge emphasis on doing things live, but navigating live, and YouTube, and Facebook's even worse. But if you want to just navigate and explore live streams, it's impossible. It's a disaster. Again, it's one of the areas where Twitch excels, where the other two fail. But this is even cleaner, right? Because obviously Twitch, primarily oriented as a game platform, they want to filter by type of game as a content filter, where you guys are it's just like you said, it's that open plaza to just kind of wander around and see what's happening.
Yeah. And one of the things to keep in mind is that because we're really focused on that sort of channel, that live show, you do already have a channel on Crowdcast, right? So we're just kind of taking this idea a little bit further. And so one more thing to share is that we're adding the ability to like organize your events by tags, so you can actually categorize it, and we can create a much more customized, curated Discover experience for the folks who are like looking for live video technology. They'll find the Epiphan channel, right? If you care about, LGBTQ community, you probably find the 19th news channel, right? So you're able to like navigate these different channels based on interest.
Right. No, and that's amazing, because that, again, it goes a long way of that discovery, right? And that's where ultimately all of this really starts to make a difference, is when people can discover it, they maybe learn something new or encounter something new. That's where YouTube has been such a corner of the world for VOD content, right? Is that they do run some weird algorithms to get you there, but that is why YouTube is what it is that wandering around ability. But trying to do that with live has been a barrier.
Yeah.
So
one thing
taking down that barrier is really cool.
Yeah. One thing to mention is that YouTube at the end of the day is an ad-based social media platform. So is Facebook, so is Twitch, so is Instagram. We're not. We're funded by you. Like, our customers support Crowdcast. We're profitable. We're not. We're not venture. We don't have like a match of venture capital investor. In fact, we have no VC investors. We have some angels. So we're pretty independent, which is great. And because we have a different business model, and this is important for us, we're never financially motivated to exploit people's data, right? And because of that, we get to build, and this is something that I've honestly never seen before. We get to build a live video network, a live media platform, but it with teaming up with the people who are creating the content, as opposed to trying to exploit them, right? Normally, you are creating content for YouTube. YouTube is using that to then sell ads, and then you get kind of, if you only make money if you get a ton of views, because then you're able to sell ads, and that's not a healthy relationship for 99% of the people out there. So we're trying to flip it on its head. I I've never seen this as an example previously, right? So this is definitely new charted territory for us and for the world. But we think this is possible where you can create, imagine if the algorithm was co-developed with the people who are creating the content, right? So we can actually do things like that. So as we get further in this direction of allowing you to like navigate events, find other channels, we get to literally get feedback from our customers, be like, okay, are you enjoying this? Do you feel like people are discovering your events well? If not, can we give you extra data so that you can see what people are searching for to find you? Like we can actually have that relationship. So that's what I'm really, really excited about. Our plan. This has always been our plan from the beginning, just been one step at a time, layer by layer. And we've got like a whole another 5 to 10 year plan, beyond this. But this is a big piece that's coming within the next year.
No, that's awesome. I'm excited to see how that gets implemented. It's really great. Again, as a customer experience, we've been incredibly happy for the past year using Crowdcast with the tools that are there already, and seeing those improve and grow is amazing, for sure. So that's really exciting. Really looking forward to it. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably wrap up there. This has already been a fairly long discussion, but a good one. I really appreciate your time, Sai.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. I love, again, talking about live video and kind of geeking out on all the different things you can do.
Yeah.
And I'm also really excited to see all the stuff that you guys are doing. And again, nice work and congrats on pulling off such a technically high quality live show when people don't know how to do this stuff, right? So nice work there.
Yeah, no, and again, I do truly believe that what you guys already have on offer really is an extremely flexible, honestly, very affordable platform that gives a huge range of content creators, from individuals to businesses to full-on conferences, covering all of that. And that's really what I think is not as out there as it should be. So, hopefully we're going to see that growth for Crowdcast as you guys continue to improve what is already, as far as I can see, one of the best tool sets available online, period. So, that's amazing. So anyone who's platform shopping, maybe you've been dealing with YouTube, but you're getting sick of the ads that don't fund you, that are just funding Google. Again, not to knock that, to each their own, but that, or whatever it might be, if you're looking for something that is more in your hands, more controllable, has the capability of providing extremely high quality video if you're using hardware encoders like the Epiphan Pearls, or if you're just starting out and you just need to do it in a browser, Crowdcast has you covered. And I think that's absolutely amazing to have that good mix there. And again, as a presenter, the tools, when I bring it up and log in and I can see the Q&A and the polls and the chat, kind of nice and easy. It's super easy to use. Anyone can figure it out. It makes the job of the presenter also extremely easy. And ultimately, people use what's easy. If it's too difficult, they're just not going to do it. So again, it's that barrier to entry thing. So yeah. Yeah, just Danny was saying in chat here, he's saying good luck to Sai and best wishes to Crowdcast. And, Danny, I know you do a lot of live streaming. If you haven't looked at Crowdcast yet, highly recommend it. You hear us talk about it all the time on this show. So if you still haven't looked at it yet, I do recommend checking it out and trying it out. You might find that it's a great fit for a lot of the customers out there who are looking for that platform, of whether it's an actual paywall or whether it's just an email trade-off thing. It's so easy. It's been great. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We'll let you go. But to everyone watching, thanks you for joining as well. I hope this was informative and enjoyable. We are here every other week now on Live at Epiphan, Thursdays at 3 o'clock. We have a show coming up on March 25th, and I currently do not recall what the subject is because it's been a busy week and I'm not even sure what day it is. So as always, do all the socially things like follow, subscribe, and all that stuff. And of course, if you know someone who is live stream platform shopping, share this video with them and mention Crowdcast to them. And of course, always mention Epiphan and Coding Hardware if they're looking to really up the game and produce really professional quality content. So that's great. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.